today I'm going to help you crate train your dog. These are the crates that we let the dogs sleep in whenever we take them on vacation and stuff. They just pack up really nicely, but you can use these methods for any kind of crate. It's all about just getting the dog more comfortable with the crate. Here I've got Shelby's breakfast. I'm just going to show you the steps I would take if our dogs weren't crate trained. The most important thing is starting slow, and you want to do only what the dog's comfortable with, and if they regress and they seem uncomfortable, you want to take it back a step and work more on that step before moving it forward. If you're not a huge fan of crate training, just keep in mind there's always circumstances where a crate may have to be used. If your dog goes to the vet and has a procedure, they're going to go in either a crate or a cage-like structure after their procedure. If they tell you to bring your dog home without activity, you may have to use a crate to keep them safe. And then, of course, if you take your dogs on vacations like we do, most houses require that the dog is crated if you're not there. And for us, the dogs sleep in their crate. I just think they're a very valuable tool, and they can be used for a lot of different scenarios, especially if your puppy is younger. Maybe they're getting into trouble while you're away. You can crate them while you're not there to supervise so that they don't keep reinforcing bad behaviors like chewing on your shoes or counter surfing. Here I've got Shelby, and I've got her breakfast. I always recommend using kibble if you're teaching something new. That way you're only giving the dogs calories that they have to have anyway. Let's just say that Shelby is a perfectly stable dog. She doesn't have trouble following a lure or doing whatever I tell her to do with the food. So I'm just going to lure her in. Yes, and then I'm going to feed her in the crate. If your dog can't handle that, then you would want to take them in and have them run right back out and feed them outside of the crate. Early on, it's all about just getting the dog more comfortable with being in the crate or going into the crate. And you're going to want to practice this over and over until the dog is really comfortable just following the food right into the crate. And like I said, if they're not comfortable with that, yes, you can lure them in and then right back out. Now, let's say you've practiced luring them in and out. They're doing super well with that. What I would move on to next is see if they will just offer to go in without you having actual food in your hands. Yes. And then if they can handle it, feed them in the crate. If not, bring them right back out and feed them outside the crate. And another thing I really like to do is, as long as they're staying in the crate, which I know Shelby, she's still got food in there, but if your dog chooses to stay in the crate, still rewarding them for just staying in the crate. Hopefully by now your dog's doing great with going in and out of the crate, maybe even staying in there for a couple of seconds for you. If not, I have a tip for those dogs that just absolutely refuse to go in the crate. Shelby was one of those dogs originally. She was terrified of going in. This tip is just going to utilize something that dogs like to use anyways. It's their nose. So I will take a towel. I put the towel in the crate. And then what I'm going to do is spread kibble all along the towel. And then I'm just going to twist the towel or maybe flip it, kind of make it into a ball. And depending on how large your crate is, you can do multiple towels. I used to line her crate with multiple towels filled with her kibble. And what'll happen, Shelby, is she'll have to actually use her nose to get the kibble out of the towel. Now, if your dog really likes using their nose, this should be enough to kind of push them into enjoying the crate a little bit more. I would try doing things like this that don't put as much pressure on the dog to go in when you want them to. You could try feeding them all their meals in the crate. That's a really good way to get them to like their crate. You could also use toys that are specifically designed to hold their food, where you can freeze their food in there. That could be a really good way to get them accustomed to the crate if they're just kind of resistant to it. If they really enjoy toys like this or lick mats, you could definitely throw some in there during the day to feed them their breakfast or their supper. Let's say you've finished all these steps, your dog is super comfortable just going into the crate on their own. I would recommend leaving the crate open during the day, so anytime your dog feels overwhelmed or maybe they need a nap, they can offer to go into their crate by themselves. Don't let anyone bother them in their crate. Don't let kids stick their fingers through the slots in the crate. Don't let other dogs mess with them when they're in the crate. You want the crate to be a safe space. You also do not want to use the crate as punishment. So if your dog does something bad, you definitely don't want to drag your dog to the crate and crate them, because you want the crate to be a super positive place. You want the dog to enjoy going to their crate, because if you want them to sleep in there or spend a lot of time in there during the day while you're at work, you don't want them to think that it's because they've done something wrong. Now let's say your dog has passed all the steps with flying colors. They're offering to go into the crate by themselves. Go ahead. Shelby, crate. You could pair it with the verbal at this point. Our verbal command is crate. So when we say crate, it means to go in and stay in until they've received their release. The release is Shelby, break. Similar to the way you would always teach a release command, you want to reward duration in the crate. So like I said earlier, if they choose to stay in there a couple seconds, you definitely want to reward that, and you want to work it up and start to push the dog to stay in there when you're further away from the crate, when you're in a different room, and you want to make sure that you have a way to reinforce that. Once they're staying in the crate and they're doing really well with going in and out and staying in there for a few seconds, in our case, we can just put this down, but we don't have to zip it yet. If you had a regular door crate, you could try shutting the door but not locking it, because you still want a way to reinforce the dog for staying in there even with the door down, because a lot of dogs, they'll love the crate until it gives that trapped feeling when the door is closed. And after you have heavily rewarded them going into the crate, staying in the crate, even with the door partially closed, you can actually try closing the door, or in our case, zipping the door. And I'm going to leave just enough unzipped just to reward her. You want to be sure you do plenty of practice with the door completely shut. And you want to make sure that you practice with you maybe walking out of the room or walking around the room. Maybe you put them in there while you wash some dishes or something, because you want the dog to understand that it's a good place to be regardless of where you're at. Because if you're at work, you're not going to be there to reinforce the dog for their good choices in the crate. You're not going to be able to correct their bad choices. You want to make sure the dog has a super positive outlook of the crate. Now let's say you want to teach a consistent release cue with the crate. How would you do that? I would open the door. If she tries to poke her nose out, I would close the door. So with a metal door, that would look like closing it if they try to poke out a little bit. And if they decide to stay in there like Shelby's doing, I would reward that, because they're not coming out when the door's opening. And you want to slowly increase that to where the door's totally open and they're staying in their crate. You want to reward that enough to where when you totally open the door, they're choosing to stay in their crate until they receive a release word. When you teach the actual release word, if you've never taught one before, the way you want to do it is you want to make the dog excited to get out of the command. And for crate training, for example, I would maybe stand up and get a little more excited. Shelby, break. And maybe move back so she has to chase a little bit, because that kind of activates her prey drive. And she's choosing to go back in there. Good girl. The main thing is you want to always reinforce, if you give the command to go in the crate, the dog does not come out until they've been released. The biggest thing with crate training is consistency. A lot of people, especially with a young puppy, they will give up in the middle of the night whenever the puppy is screaming at them to be let out of the crate. From then, they may let the puppy sleep in the bed, and there it's all over with. Because I know there's a lot of problem solving with crate training, but if you stick with it and you reinforce the dog for good things and you make sure that they're held accountable for bad things, it can be a really positive place for a dog. And when they get older, they'll love their crate like Shelby and Gunner do. This is one of those skills, as soon as you get a dog, whether it's older, whether it's younger, whether it's a brand new puppy, I definitely recommend starting on crate training as one of the first things that you try to teach them. It's just a very valuable skill for every dog. And I hope this video was helpful in crate training your dog. See you next time.